Hi, friends. Welcome to A Glow in the Dark. This is Carissa Kurowski, and I have a very special guest with me today. In the light of the Thanksgiving holidays, I'm here in my beautiful hometown in Colorado, and I've got my sister, Casey, with me.
Hi, friends.
So I wanted to do a little special on anxiety because a lot of us experience anxiety around the holidays, especially being in close quarters with family we may or may not want to see. So it's something that we both have experienced, and Casey in particular has had some issues with panic attacks in the past, and I haven't experienced that. So I wanted to bring her in to talk a little bit about her experience with that and what helped. So I guess just start by talking about how that started happening to you.
My first experience with a panic attack was when I was about 16. I was driving over the mountain pass in Colorado and just started to get kind of sweaty palms. My heart started racing and just feeling like things were closing in on me. I was actually with Carissa at the time, and I asked her to pull over so I could get out of the car. And luckily, that kind of dissipated the feeling of feeling trapped. So that kind of.
I don't remember that. Where were we? Where were we driving?
We were driving to Denver.
To Denver.
I don't know. I can't remember what we were doing it for, but we were alone.
Okay.
So, and I had felt a little bit anxious here and there. I guess maybe, like a month previously to that. I was a little freaked out that I was going to start having panic attacks, but I would say that I got close to having like 2 or 3 panic attacks after that, but it never really went into a full-blown panic attack. And then all of a sudden, my anxiety kind of just dissipated, and I didn't really experience it until now. And I'm now 25, so quite a few years went by without feeling anxious. So that first
one you said you were 16.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So then I started feeling anxious again about 3 months ago, I would say, and I started a new job in March of last year, and I'm working for the child protection team. So it's a very I deal with a lot of angry people on a daily basis. I deal with stressful situations, seeing home environments that are very scary, very dirty. I'm a very empathetic person, compassionate, and that everything gets thrown at you very quickly after you get trained. And it was very hard to deal with, I would say. You have to really learn how you're going to put up a protective barrier. So I say that now I've kind of learned how to do that a little bit. I mean, I'm still working through it. So I started in March. I was going along pretty good. About 3 months ago, it's like the anxiety slowly started to build and build. So how it manifested was I would get a little, like on the car ride home, I would start thinking about my day. And for me, anxiety comes in my neck. So my neck starts closing off. So what I say by it started to build is during my car ride homes, I would every day, my neck would start to feel tighter and tighter every day.
When you say you're thinking about your day, is this like a thought spiral? Like one negative thing comes up and then it like goes and goes and goes and goes, right? Or is it different than that?
Um, I think that's a good way to describe it. I think it depends on the day though, too. Um, I think for me, sometimes it wasn't even about the negative parts of the day, but just everything that I didn't get done that day or that I have to do for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also, just recognizing that this job is, I'm dealing with real families and real lives, and I took tremendous responsibility on myself that if I didn't get something done that day, I was failing, these kids. Um, so, um, and again, it's really hard to do any kind of work that you do with humans or any human services field or whatever, because you're just you're dealing with the real lives, and it's hard to take on or to kind of separate that responsibility for me. So yeah, anyways, it was my anxiety started to keep building. Every day I noticed I was just a little bit, my heart would just race a little bit faster each day. Things would excite me quicker. And then finally what happened was I had a very bad situation where it was just one of the worst removals is what we called it when we had to remove the kids from a situation. So it was just the worst that I had seen as thus far of working in the child protection team. But even then I was handling it okay. And then I went on a trip to go see my family. And it was actually for a funeral, a death in my family. And I think just it was kind of the perfect storm that had a really, stressful week at work. Then I went to, I traveled with a 1.5-year-old, and then, went to this obviously high emotion, family gathering. So while I was visiting with family, everything was kind of fine, but then there was also this tornado warning coming on the TV, and all of a sudden, like, I just started sweating, my throat closed in, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I just the, what a lot of people describe the panic attacks are, just you can get the breath. And then, luckily my mom was there, she held me, and I just started crying. And what I thought was really interesting about that situation was I think honestly for me, it was everything kind of poured out because I was away from work for 4 days by the time I had that panic attack. And I think it just was just enough for my body to say, like, you can't keep going. You have to stop at this point. So we were gonna leave the family, leave the next day, and so I was really, really nervous about getting back on a plane, because kind of, again, what I think kind of set me over the edge on this panic attack was the feeling of being trapped. I think that's why my anxiety heightens in the car, because I feel kind of trapped. I'm so fortunate I didn't have another panic attack on the plane. I got home okay. I went to work the next day, but halfway through it, I was just writing a report, and all of a sudden I just felt so tired. I kind of made an excuse to go home because I just didn't feel very good. And then I went home that day. The next day I came back in. Well, actually, that evening I got a massage to kind of try to relax me because I still hadn't felt like I completely, what's the word that I'm thinking of?
I don't know.
I felt like I hadn't,
Gotten over it.
yeah, recovered
It's a
from a
better
panic
word than
attack.
gotten over it.
Yeah. I feel like I hadn't recovered. Panic attacks make you feel extremely tired and just depleted of everything. So anyways, I did get a massage that night. I felt better. The next day I went into work again about noon. Again, I was just kind of doing computer work. I set my schedule those 2 days that I wasn't going to see any clients because I knew I couldn't deal with anybody right now. But then, again, it just kind of washed over me all of a sudden. Just same symptoms set in, and I had to lay down on the floor. I did eventually get to my car, and my mom luckily works very close to me, so she was able. We actually went to the urgent care because I thought for sure there's something medically wrong with me. I felt so terrible that I thought that something was really going on.
Terrible.
Physically, yeah, that physically something was really going on with me. Mm-hmm. So I went to the urgent care. They ran some tests. I thought maybe my iron was low, and did some other tests, and everything turned out normal. When I heard that everything was normal, I started sobbing because it was such a scary thought that I can't just fix it with something, because it's not just something physical that the doctors could say, oh yeah, you just have to take some iron, you're really, anemic right now or something. Yeah. So by that time, I would say I was really debilitated. I felt like I couldn't even stand up at that point. I was just crying uncontrollably. Then what further made me anxious was that because I didn't feel like I could take care of my son. So, and again, he's 1.5, and it was a scary feeling that I can't be alone with my son right now because I can't even get up off the couch. So I'd say the next day after kind of hearing the blood tests, I did eventually just go to sleep and thought maybe just if I get a lot of rest and don't move out of bed and everything, I just sleep it off, I'll be pretty okay. The next morning, immediately when I woke up, my heart was just pounding. So I told my husband I want to go back to, we went to the Docs on Call, and said I need to ask for medication at this point because I can't move. So it was an extremely horrible ride to the doctor's office, and we only live about 3 minutes away from Docs on Call, but it was like the scariest drive. It was so incredibly, I knew I needed medication, but to will myself to get up into the car even it felt like a tremendous feat. But I knew as soon as I got there, I would feel better. So that motivated me. When I was in the doctor's office, I was so exhausted. I could barely walk. When I was waiting in the waiting room, I laid down on the chairs when they called me into the office. As soon as I got into the doctor's office, I laid down and then I just sobbed again. So the doctor obviously saw that I was extremely debilitated at that point, and she prescribed me some medication right away. She walked me through kind of the 3 basic ones. And I really liked that she took into account that, you know, I was a mom, and that I needed to still kind of, you know, operate and also still go to work and all of that. So I think it was hydroxine, I think so. And it was just the she said it was a little bit of a not intense as some other ones that they prescribe to people, that it doesn't make you extremely so tired, and so, you know, I gave it a try. I'd say that for the next 2 days, you're allowed to take a pill like every 4 hours. So for the next 2 days, I took a pill every single 4 hours. I didn't even want to see if I needed it or not. I was just, you know, so debilitated that I just needed the relief and needed to break my cycle of feeling panicky.
I wish I would have done that postpartum.
Yeah.
I wish I would have done that.
Yeah. So
then you said those kind of helped afterwards, made you feel better.
Yes.
Or at least functional enough to go to do work and get back to things.
Yes. I mean, after my first dose, it was like, it felt like a miracle to me because I could actually just like breathe, and I had felt like I broke the cycle, you know. So I asked the doctor to write a note to my work, so I could have a couple days off. I just texted my boss and I was really honest. I said, this is really hard for me to admit, but this is what's going on and I just need a couple days. Which that in itself was super hard to do because, again, I knew that I was, you know, putting off all my work on my coworkers, and then there was things that I promised my clients that I would do during those days. But at that point, you know, I couldn't even think about that because I was so depleted and so exhausted. I mean, it was kind of like if she didn't let me have a couple days off, I was just gonna be like, well, I have to quit then because I can't operate like this. But I mean, she totally understood. She was great about it. And I ended up kind of coming in and out of work for the next 2 weeks. I tried some half days at first, and she was really great with me of kind of transitioning back into work, and, you know, all the while still talking about, okay, you know, how did I get to that point and what do I need to do differently moving forward? So, you know, it was, I made some plans with her that I definitely wouldn't bring my work home with me. I was working into the evenings, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock every night. I was working on the weekends. So, you know, I mean, and that part is just, I'm really lucky to have a boss that she was, you know, able to work with me. Personally though, that I was able to put in my own hands was, I did go to see, a counselor. I have not been to him since, but that's something that I would like to do. I think I still struggle with thinking that I need that help, but I went to him for one session and he really did help me. And so a couple things he said to me, he actually specializes in anxiety, and one thing that he told me was I mean, he has kind of a mindfulness approach. So he said, you know, instead of trying to avoid how you're feeling, next time when you feel the anxiety come on, put your attention on where it's originating from.
Nice.
So, like I said, I used the medication for the first 2 days, just around the clock. But then third day, I'd say kind of used it like every 8 hours. Pretty soon, I was able to. I felt like, you know, I'll just see how I feel, and if I need one, I can take one again. So then after meeting with him, I've been off of the medication pretty much since then. I just felt like I really needed it to reboot. I was in this horrible cycle. But since then, you know, my car ride home is still, it still makes me somewhat anxious, but, you know, I'll sit while I'm driving if I feel like my throat's closing up just a little bit. Instead of trying to avoid it or, you know, start thinking about something else, that in itself will make me anxious because I'm trying to think, what can I think about that will put my attention off of this? And that makes me anxious. So what I tried after speaking with him is just putting my attention on the tightness, and it all of a sudden it dissipated.
And I gotta say, that is so awesome that he shared that with you, because I probably could have saved myself many years of the issues I went through.
Yeah.
Because that was probably one of the things that I most did was push it away. Like, I don't want to like try and push it away, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Exactly. The more you try, the more it will stay with you, I think. So
just real quick, I'm going to do a separate video on some techniques. If you guys are looking for specific things, non-medication that you can do for panic attacks, I'm going to do a separate video because I think you might have a couple more, and our mom actually had issues with this too. So she has some breathing exercises and techniques. But I really like that one a lot.
Yeah.
It's something really important that I've learned recently as well, and has kind of come up for me. I did rapid transformational therapy, and during my hypnosis session, one thing that came up for me was that I couldn't deal with my emotions. I couldn't process them, and I was never taught how to process them. So I think that's just so important that you have to really experience what you're feeling, and it's really scary, and it sucks to be open to that and let yourself really listen to what you're feeling and process what you're feeling. But that really seems to be one of the only ways that you can actually get through those difficult moments.
Yeah. And it is really scary to go there.
Yeah.
But you know what my husband also said was, he's like, you know, if you feel like you need to get out of the car, just pull over
just get out of the car.
and get out of the car.
Wow, amazing.
And I'm like, which, you know, it sounds so simple, but when you're in that mindset, it doesn't seem as simple. But after he said that, I'm like, oh, now I at least have a plan of, you know, how to do that. So one thing that I really liked that you talked about was how you have I always call this spiraling, like things that build and build and build. But when you were talking about it, just talking about how you do kind of have those things that build up, and then you said, Bill, it all came out later. Well, that happens in more than just anxiety, just with anything. If you keep bottling things up, anger, if you're experiencing depression, anxiety, it's like putting a Band-Aid on it. And I experienced that. I always talk about my depression because it was more difficult than my anxiety, but I experienced that too, where if I kept pushing something away and pushing it back,
you're not pushing it back forever. You're just putting a Band-Aid on it. You're like the little Dutch boy with your finger in the wall. And then eventually it bursts and it all comes to light. And I had times like that too, where I would just sit in my bed sobbing all day, my thoughts spiraling, not knowing how to get out of it. So I think I really liked how you talked about that. And it's a good example.
It can be frustrating though after the fact because again, it was like a month. I watched myself and I felt myself feeling these anxious feelings and knowing that they were building stronger and stronger. And I didn't stop to address them before it, obviously manifested in this debilitating series of panic attacks.
Well, and Casey and I both have perfectionist tendencies, which I think a lot of people do in our society. We're not special in that regard. But having a perfectionist mentality also makes you gloss over things and like lie to yourself about how bad things are. Like, I can't tell you how much I have lied, not only to myself, but to other people, but also to myself about how it wasn't that bad. And I haven't had, experiences like that where I've just like melted down in public. But I also, when I was really going through bad stuff, I didn't have a full-time job. So that helped a lot. But I think a lot of people lie to themselves about how actually serious it is, especially if you're a mom, especially if you're going through like postpartum depression or something. You want to think that you're strong enough, and it feels horrible to think that you're not taking care of yourself or your baby in the way that you should be. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's just a horrible feeling to like you said, you talked about that. You said like thinking that I can't take care of my baby is like, it's really hard. I want to cry right now actually talking about it.
Yeah, it makes it so much harder. When you know that there's somebody else you have to take care of. But I guess that's just going back to the important thing is you can't take care of them if you don't take care of yourself first.
So another thing I wanted to talk about is that and I don't want to say anything that's like demeans your experience. I feel like in general, I've just had this huge, like, immense struggle with mental health for a lot of my life. And I feel like you've been a little bit more where you've had, like, some periods where you've struggled with things. But in general, for you, it hasn't been quite as, like, intense and long-term. I mean, is that true?
Yes, okay. It's all been pretty much situational for me.
So, but this is why I wanted to point it out, because you've got someone like my sister here who hasn't really maybe struggled with these issues long term, and then it just happened. So my point is that it can happen to anybody, even if you think you can manage your life really well. Anybody can be susceptible to experiencing these kind of issues. And especially you've got, you add really stressful, a lot of us are in stressful jobs or stressful situations, being caregivers or having high pressure at work. And that can all kind of compound on problems.
And I just wanted to touch on that about how it can happen to anybody. I've always been an extremely calm person. Everybody has told me I'm a calm person. Like, I mean, that is, I identify with being that person who is calm, doesn't get stressed. I'm a level-headed person, and I can, things don't affect me.
Real quick, one of my favorite, you might not remember this. This was when we were younger. I don't know how young, but we were just driving home, and I was like, oh, do you ever just feel like there's bees in your head? Like they're just, your thoughts are just like, and she looks at me and she's like, no. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember it. It's true though. I mean, that's it. I honestly, my thoughts don't always get away from myself. So, I never thought that I was going to experience panic attacks to that degree.
Yeah.
With what kind of person I always thought I was.
Yeah.
And even getting this job, it was in the interview, they said, how do you deal with stress? And I was like,
Good.
I'm great at dealing with stress. I will not let stress destroy me. I will take care of myself before that. And it's just the fact that I hadn't experienced that level of stress yet.
Yeah.
So it was an eye-opener. But it could have been any stress that got me. It just happened to be a stressful job.
So that's the other thing I wanted to point out is that, Casey has this situation where she has real world consequences, right? So if you don't do the right thing or you say the wrong thing in court, you potentially could go to jail. Mm-hmm. Like you have real scary real world consequences. And now that being said, other people who experience anxiety for things that it may not be a real world consequence, you feel it the same way. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. You feel it the same way. Like you could go to jail because of whatever, XYZ. It could be like, oh my God, mine last year was, all the other parents brought Valentine's Day gifts. So now I'm the bad mom and she's going to grow up to be this horrible human being because I didn't bring Valentine's Day gifts. How dumb is that? But you feel that anxiety the same way, even though there was no real world consequence to that. Who gives a shit if I bring Valentine's Day cards to daycare? I don't now. But you still feel that intense stress, and you get those spiraling thoughts where it gets out of control and it becomes a life or death situation.
Yep.
So I guess to kind of wrap things up, you're feeling a little bit better now. You said you've been able to feel okay without the medication, and you're able to manage things better at work.
Yeah, and I've used my medication, once or twice or a couple times, a handful of times after the initial panic attacks, just in certain situations. So right now, I feel like I don't always use my medication though either. When I'm feeling a little anxious, I'm trying to, deal with it with my, with the tools I've learned.
Okay, I ran out of space. So we were just doing final thoughts and then we'll wrap up.
I was just saying that I've learned to use the tools that I have, but I still carry my medication with me like everywhere. But there's been a couple times where I've forgotten it, and that in itself has created some anxiety. So I'm still a little bit dependent on it, only because I know if it's not there, if in case I need it. So, and I think I'm gonna slowly, that's just gonna take time, because this last time it was just really scary. But right now it's okay for me. I feel okay with that. And knowing that it's just gonna, like I said, take time and be more confident in myself as I go through it. So
okay, cool. Anything else you want to say for final thoughts? That's good.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just relearning that you are in control. That's the main thing I'm working through right now. So
great. Awesome. So just in closing, I hope that this was helpful. If you haven't experienced anything like this, hopefully it was a good insight into maybe what some people go through. And if you are experiencing these things, hopefully you learned something today. and join us for the next video where we will go over some more techniques that you can use. Should have said this at the beginning, but neither of us are therapists. So, you know, if you need professional help, please go and get that. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.